Hello friends, and welcome back to another human design series video. This is video number 3. And in this video, we're going to be talking about authority. Now, video 1, I talked about type, video 2, strategy, and this one is authority. Now, these 3 videos are, in my opinion, the most important things for people to know about themselves when it comes to human design when you have a genuine desire to figure out how to work with it on a basic level. There is so much more depth and so much individualization that happens on your chart. So this is when having a chart analysis reading is really helpful because it really zones into like who you are and how you function in the world. However, these 3 things can give you a lot of information. So if you haven't watched video 1 or 2, I'll link them below. Super helpful for you to watch before you watch this one. Now, the reason authority is so important is because this is how we make decisions, okay? So the first video about types is really about your aura type, your specific aura type. There are 4 aura types, 5. One is a subset of another. There's the way that your aura functions in the world in relationship to other beings. Then there is strategy, which is the way that you play at the game of life, as I like to call it. And then authority, which is how you make decisions within your strategy. Now, authority works with type and strategy. So you don't just abandon your strategy. You have to work with your authority within the actual strategy. Now, when you look up authorities for human design, there's a lot of different information on it. Some people really condense authorities to the most common, and we'll talk about maybe 4 of them, because 2 of the 7 are really, they're not inner authorities. They're externally influenced. So they don't really count those as authorities. The authority is most commonly referred to as the inner guide that helps you make a decision. But because 2 of them are more of an external guide, which we'll talk about in a second, they are typically excluded from the conversation. So more often than not, you're going to see like 4 or 5 of them discussed. I'm going to talk about all 7 of them in the way that I experience them in a condensed manner that is not a lot of words, because holy monkey, some people can really talk about this and get really confusing. So, okay, let's begin with what I would call the most dominant authority, which is the emotional authority. So if you know your human design and you happen to have an emotional authority, sort of congratulations. So this is when your solar plexus in your human design chart is defined. And when your solar plexus chart is defined, that is going to override pretty much every other motor definition that you could have. So this is going to be your authority. Now, people with emotional authority have very strong emotional cycles. You feel things intensely. You go through a lot of feelings in a short period of time, even within a span of like 10 minutes. Decision-making for you is not spontaneous and cannot be. You've got to use time on your side. It's important for you to make an appropriate decision for yourself, that you give yourself the time to feel things out. That is so, so important. Go through the wave of your feelings, feel all of your feelings, and then you'll come to a place of clarity. And when you have clarity, that's when you know that's the correct decision for you to make. I think a lot of times what I see with clients who have emotional authorities who don't know how to work with them is they often get presented with all of this information and they want to just say yes spontaneously because they're riding a high emotionally, or they're riding a low emotionally, so they're trying to get away from that feeling. So they'll make these really rapid decisions, but that is not appropriate for your authority. If you have an inner authority that is emotional, you've got to ride the full wave of the spectrum. You're never going to be like 100% sure of the decisions that you make, but you might get to like 80%, and that's good enough as long as you have that clarity within you. All right, so the next one is the sacral authority. So if your sacral center is defined, but you have no definition in your solar plexus, which is the previous emotional authority we talked about, then this is when you have a sacral authority. Now, the sacral authority and the sacral strategy sound very similar because they are. So by that, I mean generators who have that definition in their sacral, they have that natural energy. They're constantly generating their own energy. Typically when I talk to a generator, which is a type, it's an orotype, I'll say, okay, you've really got to listen to your body. You've really got to respond by way of your body. So the sacral inner authority works the same way. You get this internal or that's very gut instinct. And that is what you've got to go with. Another way to think about it, if you have a sacral authority, is what gives you energy and what feels depleting, because this is also kind of like a boundary authority. It teaches you about personal boundaries. So if you're thinking about making a decision and you feel really depleted, that's a sign. If you're thinking about making a decision and you feel really energized, that's a sign. If you're thinking about making a decision and you're kind of like a neutral humming, like, it's not time to make a decision yet. So you've got to wait. But for those of you with that sacral inner authority, the response happens in your body and it's very gut instinct. So you've got to learn how to trust that. All right, the third one is the splenic authority. So the splenic authority is the oldest of the inner authorities. And this one happens when you have a defined spleen, but you have an undefined sacral and an undefined solar plexus. So your governing body is going to be your spleen. Now, the tricky thing about having a splenic inner authority is that it's very quiet and subtle. It's that intuitive hit that's very instinctual. It's primal. And it happens only once. You encounter a decision, job, relationship, whatever, you get a hit. And if you're not tuned in, you're going to miss it. You're going to end up making decisions based on fear. The spleen governs the emotion of fear. You will make a decision based on fear of missing out or fear of not being good enough or something like that. Now, with people with splenic authority, it's very easy to drown out your authority because your mind is typically, I'd say, open. And so you've got a lot of stuff going on up here. And this is very loud. The mind is exceptionally loud. So if you don't know how to quiet your mind and how to be in the present moment to moment to moment, you're going to miss when you get those instinctive hits. And for a splenic authority, it feels like a resonance when it's a yes. It feels like almost like a tuning fork feeling in your body. It's not the same as a sacral, which is really gut instinct. Again, it's much more subtle. It happens only once. It can be like a whispering, like a warning sign if something is a no. But again, it's quiet and it's in moment to moment, present moment. So if you don't know how to calm yourself down, your mind down, and be in the present, you're going to miss the way that you make decisions best. The following two they start to get more specific regarding the type of aura that they are present in. The first three can kind of be in a range of aura types. These next two start to get a little bit more specific and a little bit more specific, okay? So the ego authority, also known as the heart authority, meaning that your willpower center is defined. You will have that as your primary inner authority when you have your heart center or your will defined, and then none of the other ones that we just discussed defined. So you wouldn't have a defined spleen, sacral, or solar plexus. And this one can only happen for the types that are projectors or manifestors. Okay, so if you're those two types, then you are going to be one of the people that has this ego authority potentially, or this heart authority. Now, the manifestors are motorized by their throat. I refer to it as being motorized by the throat. The throat is not a motor, but they're activated by their throat. So manifestors with this heart authority, it's really, really important that you get in touch with what do you have the willpower for to speak on, to inform other people on, to make an impact with, okay? Really listening to the heart and not being in the conversation of like, what's the outcome of this? How do I control the outcome? But just listening to what do you have the willpower for, that stamina for when it comes to informing, which is your strategy, and being impactful, which is what manifestors are supposed to do. For the projector, you are typically motorized by the G center. So if you have this heart authority, it'll be connected to your G center, which is also the center of love and self-love. And these are referred to as like the natural shamans of society. They have this really strong heart connection that allows them to influence others of course, living their type and their strategy, which is waiting to be invited, waiting to be recognized with this deep wisdom of love. So like in my own chart, I do have heart and G-center connection. So this is part of my own gift in working with other people, is transmuting and transformation, just by way of communication. But I do have a defined spleen, so I am a splenic authority. Okay, if I didn't have that, then I would be motorized by my heart or my will center. And for the projector, when it comes to making a decision with this heart authority, it's all about, what do you have the willpower to really show up for? So when you're getting those invitations, when you're getting the recognition, what do you have the will to say yes to? What is that you really have that drive to say yes to and show up for? Now, the next authority will only happen if you are a projector. Okay, so the next two that I'm going to talk about are only for projectors. The G-center authority means that you have that G-center we just talked about defined, but no other thing defined. No defined heart or spleen or sacral or solar plexus. Now, the way you make decisions with this definition is really about what feels like me, projector. So when you're getting the invitations, when you're getting the recognition, it's not so much like what feels right as it is what feels like me. Because the G-center is also about identity. So what feels like you? What feels like, okay, yes, this is me. This is not me. This is how you're going to make the decisions for saying yes or saying no to the invitations that get presented to you. And it's kind of important that you decide what makes you happy when you're making the decisions. And people will be like, oh, isn't that selfish? But that's how your inner authority works. When you're making decisions that feel like you, that make you happy, you will inherently serve your population of people really, really well, because you are following your alignment and living your inner authority. The next one, a mental authority, is also only for projectors. Now, this one becomes an external authority. Okay, so up until now, emotional, sacral, splenic, ego, and G have all been inner authorities, meaning coming from within us. This mental authority now means that you have no definition really below the throat. And you might have a defined throat if you're a mental authority, you might not. It depends. But you have no definition on the bottom half of your chart. So your mind is really, really strong. And this doesn't mean that you're making decisions from the mind. It simply means that you have this potential for like genius thinking, next level thinking, quantum leaping thinking as a mental authority. Now, when it comes to deciding like what is the way that you make decisions best, the mental authority is really influenced by environment. So this is kind of important too, that you could really be affected by the environment or the people that you surround yourself with. So it's this particular authority benefits really well from vocalization of thought. So speaking to others about what you're feeling or what you're thinking about taking on, so they can reflect to you something, and then you can make a decision that feels good to you that way. So using other people as a sounding board is a very efficient way of getting to a decision when you have this mental authority. Again, this is why it's considered an external one, because you are now using someone other than yourself to help you make a decision, still a valid way of decision making. And then the last one is only for reflectors, which is the smallest percentage of the population, about 1%, and they have no definition anywhere in their chart in any of the centers. So you really don't have an inner authority or an external authority, but it's referred to as having a lunar authority, because the strategy for reflectors is to wait a full lunar cycle or 28 days before they make a decision. So it's not entirely correct to say that they don't have an authority of any kind, because they are kind of governed by the lunar cycle. So that is kind of having something that helps you make a decision. But this type of person needs to avoid being pressured into making a decision or thinking quickly when it comes to like a job, a relationship, or something like that. You really need the whole full lunar cycle to sit with the thing in question and feel how it feels within you. And again, because you have so much openness in your chart, you're very highly susceptible to being conditioned by your environment, the people around you. So it takes time for you to step outside of your conditioning and really be in your deconditioned self, in your true self, to figure out what is the correct decision for you to make. So don't feel bad taking your time. That's what you're supposed to do, reflector. Now, one final note. We've talked about a few authorities: emotional, sacral, splenic, heart or ego, G, mental, and lunar. If you have more than one motor defined, for example, in my own chart, I happen to have my spleen defined and also my heart or my will center defined, my ego center. Your decision making is kind of going to be a mix of those two things. So, for example, I would be asking myself as a projector, what's my instinct in the moment, right, about a decision? And then also, what do I have the willpower for? What do I have that drive to show up for and be of service for people? Okay, so both of those things influence the way that I make a decision. So if you have more than one, something for you to consider, and look at the influences of both in your chart. And again, when you're looking at an individual's chart and you're doing a reading, typically that would be covered. Or if one is just really dominant and there's a reason why it would be really dominant, then that would be the only one that we talk about as far as an authority figure. But for simplicity's sake, when you get your chart done, which I can also put the link below where you get your free chart, whatever the authority is that you see displayed, now you can refer back to this video and know, okay, this is how I make decisions. So again, there's your aura type, which is the energy field that surrounds you and how it interacts in the world around you. There's a strategy that matches that aura type, which is how you play the game of life and potentially win it. And then there's authority, which is how you make decisions while you're playing out your strategy. Always, 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 always with authority, you have to be within your type and strategy to maximize the way you operate in authority. The other thing that's the truth, no matter what your authority is, in human design, the mind is not the place from which we make decisions. The mind is not the place from which we make decisions. It is an assistant. It is an idea generator. It is the place that we experience the other, but it is not the place from which we decide. Even mental projectors, it's not the place from which we decide. So very important to note. Hopefully this was really helpful. If you'd like to get your personal reading, go on down below and schedule it right on my site. We'll spend an hour together and we'll dive into all the facets of your chart that we can possibly manage. You'll also get a PDF from me and a recording link, so you can revisit your session whenever you'd like. And stay tuned for more of these. I've got a couple more videos coming your way.